At only 4 years old, my next guest, Kyle Robinson's life changes dramatically. A man he calls Big Bad Ben, or Triple B, becomes his stepfather. Over the next decade, Kyle and his siblings live in terror daily, trying anything to escape his physical and emotional abuse. With nobody to turn to, Kyle's urge to escape reality leads him to unhealthy relationships, destructive habits, and multiple run-ins with the law. Still in high school, Kyle is arrested, facing jail, and forced to defend himself in court, altering the course of his life. Despite these obstacles, Kyle went on to earn a law degree himself and became a recognized attorney in New York, entrepreneur and published author. Join me today as he shares his personal story. This is one you are not going to want to miss. Welcome to the Sober Living Stories podcast. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of sobriety. We shine a spotlight on individuals who have faced the challenges of alcoholism and addiction and are today living out their best lives sober. Each guest has experienced incredible transformation and are here to share their story with you. I'm Jessica Stepanovic, your host. Join me each week as guests from all walks of life share their stories to inspire and provide hope to those who need it most. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Sober Living Stories podcast. Today, meet Kyle Robinson. He is someone who has overcome an abusive childhood at the hands of his stepfather that went on for many years. He overcame that and went to law school, became a thriving entrepreneur, a published author, and an ultramarathon runner. Today, he's going to walk us through his personal story. I can tell you that I have read The Wandering Spark, and it's one of those books that you can't put down and you're done in a couple days. So lean in, listen to a story of overcoming, and see how you can apply positive change to your own life. Welcome, Kyle. Welcome to the show.
Sure, Jessica. Thanks so much first for having me. And I appreciate that intro. That's pretty nice. And so obviously it's not a straight line to go from where I started to where I ended up. And so just to give you a little bit background to me, when I was just 4 years old, my mother got a divorce, and it was just me, my mom, my older brother at 6 years old. I was at 4 years old, and my little sister at 3 years old. And one day I hear a knock at the door, and I'm upstairs playing in my room with some He-Man action figures or something like that. And I hear the doorbell ring, and I got really curious, and I ran downstairs. And at the bottom of the stairs, there's this big, huge man standing in front of me at like 6'3" with like a big brown beard and like bifocal glasses. And just as a little 4 year boy, I'm just stunned. My mom, who answered the door, went to go get something to drink. So it's just me and this intimidating figure. And I'm just looking at him. And I greeted him as any 4 year old boy would. I just punched him in the leg and I just giggled. And what this man did is he made a fist himself and punched little 4 year old Kyle in the stomach. And I just keeled over, and I couldn't scream because I couldn't breathe, and tears were just coming down my face. And he just was looking at me, didn't do anything, didn't apologize, and just walked around me and went in the kitchen. And I just scampered upstairs. And that was my first introduction to my stepfather, Ben, or as my sister and I later call him, Big Bad Ben, or Triple B. And so that's kind of how my life started at 4 years old. And it didn't get any better as I was growing older. And so as I got older, it kind of got worse because I was older and I was acting out, and he just didn't become a nice guy. And you might say, well, what about your mom? Didn't she do anything? And I know my mom loves me or loved me, but she was just looking for a father for me and my brother and my sister. And so she wasn't going to about to make another mistake with another man and say, oh, another failed marriage on her hands. And so she also rationalized it's not that bad. You know what I mean? So she kind of looked the other way and just kind of forced this man onto us. No, I mean, forced this as a father. And, she made us call him dad, made us tell him that we loved him. So in my head, as a 4 year old and then growing up, I thought this is what a stepfather or a father was supposed to be like. This is what love was. I didn't know any better. I thought all men were just really, really mean and just terrifying. So I was terrified. So as I got older and I got into high school, I started to rebel out a lot. I got into fights all the time. I got expelled from school. I started hanging out with the wrong group of friends, and I got in, drinking, smoking pot, and just it wasn't going well. And eventually I got expelled from school for fighting. And then I was so upset because, at 16 or 17 years old, I was just frustrated. All my friends, so-called friends, weren't getting suspended, weren't getting kicked out of school. And I was just like, they're doing the same thing I'm doing. I just don't understand how come I am having the problem. And I was just so frustrated. And so what I decided to do was like, you know what, I just want to stop this madness. And I realized they didn't have the same kind of home life I have. And I didn't realize that until later on. And so to stop this madness, what I decided to do was go turn myself into drug rehab as a 17-year-old because I didn't know any answers. There's nobody else helping me. And so I just took it upon myself. And so I went to go turn myself into drug rehab as a 17-year-old. And you really can't go and do that because you need to either be court ordered or you need to have your parents sign you in. And so when I got there, they're like, well, you just can't do that. Eventually I got my mom to come down there and sign me in. And I was in drug rehab when I was 17 years old. And this after I was expelled from high school and things like that. And so it was actually a real safe place because I was away from Triple B. And so it kind of just stopped the madness for a moment in time. Then I went back to school after drug rehab. And this is after, like I said, I was expelled before. So this is actually my sixth year of high school after drug rehab because I had to take my junior year again because I missed a whole nother year again. So after I get back to high school in my sixth year, two actually amazing things happened that one year. So when I went back to high school, they kind of threw me into in-school suspension. And what in-school suspension is, you just sit in the classroom and you can't talk and you can't leave, and all your work is brought to you. And I wasn't able to hang out with any of my friends or anything like that. So it kind of kept me on the straight and narrow. And so, but the in-school suspension teacher named Mr. Brady, I got to know him really well because the only time you're allowed to talk is to ask questions about schoolwork. So I'm kind of a talker. And so I just started asking him about questions about things. And we kind of got this relationship. And he was like the first male role model who told me, you know what, you can actually do something. You're actually smart. You can like, and I didn't really act on it at that moment, but it was like a seed planted in me. I was kind of blown away that an adult figure was like, you know what, you could actually do something with, like, I believe in you. It was kind, it was nice to me. And so that was really big. And then the second big thing that happened to me too, and I talk about this in the book, I was invited in some sort of fight or altercation after school one day, but this time I was 18 years old. I was like, I think I was around 19 years old because it was my sixth year of high school. And I didn't want to get in any trouble because if I would have got arrested, I would have been thrown into like adult jail. And so I was really scared of getting in trouble. So anyhow, um, there's a kid who wanted to fight me, and I did not want to fight him because I was a smart mouth. And so I was kind of running away from him. And before I knew it, there's a big crowd around us, and I'm just trying to get away from him. And then a cop came and grabbed us, and we both got arrested for, assault, disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace. I was like, oh no, I'm in big trouble. And so I had to go to court, but my mom would not get me a lawyer this time because when I was younger, I got arrested for all kinds of things. My mom actually got me a lawyer. I was doing like, hit and skip, underage drinking, all kinds of stuff. And she got me a lawyer before. She goes, this time she did not believe. And this time I didn't do anything wrong. There was no punch thrown. There's no assault. But my mom did not believe me. Nobody really believed me, which is understandable because I didn't have a track record for them to believe. So anyhow, so I had to represent myself in court. And because I couldn't get a lawyer and I knew I didn't do anything wrong. And so what happened, to make, kind of a long story short, the cop was on the stand and they asked if I wanted to ask some questions, and I sure did. And so as a 19-year-old kid, I'm asking this cop, I go, where were you when you saw this altercation happen? He goes, oh, it was about 75, 100 yards away. And I go, were you standing? He goes, no, I was sitting in my police cruiser. I go, okay, what did you see? He said, well, I saw about 100 kids standing around you guys. And I go, and I said, so you're telling me from 75 yards away, sitting in your police cruiser through 100 kids, you saw me assault somebody else? And he goes, well, no, I can't really say that. And that's all the judge needed to hear. I was found not guilty,
Wow.
case dismissed. And that was just another seed, what Mr. Brady planted me, like, if you do believe in yourself and you do try, you can, do something with your life. And so that was just two amazing things that happened to me. And I eventually graduated high school. I think my class rank was 346 out of like 349. I graduated with a 1.046 GPA, but I was done with high school. And, college was not on my mind at all. And so right after high school, I went and got a job at an oil change place. And let me tell you, I don't know anything about cars. So I was just working there. And so I decided, you know what, I wanted more for my life. So I decided to take the ACT. I got into college and I was like, you know what, I need to take this seriously. So I stopped like drinking, I stopped smoking weed. And my first semester of college, I just studied and I just put my head down and I made the dean's list my first semester of college in college. And this is after, 6 years of high school. And I was like, oh, I knew it. This is amazing. And so after I get almost a 4.0, I decided to transfer to another school. I decided to go to Kent State University. But when I transferred to Kent State University, I made a whole new group of friends and they're a bunch of party friends. And so I started hanging out with them and start drinking, smoking weed, and my grades start to plummet, almost immediately. And I started just partying a lot because these kids were, away from their parents, for the first time. And I've already did all this stuff in high school. And I was like, oh, here we go again. So it was kind of like a repeat of high school, doing drugs, hanging out. I don't want to say bad crowd. These kids just were just exposed for, living on their own for the first time. And I got right back in the swing of things with them. So eventually, one day, I was driving my car down to the bars and we just started drinking a lot and driving home. I decided to drive home for some reason. And as I was driving home, I took a left onto our street and I hit the gas and I rammed into a telephone pole, totaled my Jeep, put everybody in the hospital. I got arrested for a DUI. And I was just like, oh, great, here we go again. This is like,
Mm-hmm.
but I kind of rationalize it as a lot of people do. Oh, you're in college. It's okay to get a DUI. But if you really think about it, it's not okay to wreck your Jeep, put everybody in the hospital, told her, you know what I mean? Things were not
Right.
going well. And so after that, I was like, I eventually graduated college, but with like a 2.02 GPA. And I was like, well, this is like, I didn't have any prospects, anything like that. And so right
Mm-hmm.
after college, I kind of just wanted to run away. And so I had a friend who lived out in San Francisco, California. And I just drove out to San Francisco, California and lived out there for a few years. And it was kind of nice to get away from all of my old friends and things like that. And so I was living out in San Francisco and it was actually kind of good. I kind of got my finances together. I was bartending. I was like, but I really want more out of life. And so I was like, I want to go to law school because I remember what I did in high school and I was believing in myself and I always was kind of interested in the law. And so what I decided to do was like, well, I need to take the LSAT to get into law school. I was like, well, I don't know if people that take 6 years to graduate high school or have a 2.02 GPA in college can go to law school. I was like, but I'm going to try. And so again, I stopped smoking weed. I stopped drinking. I just studied for the LSAT. And so, and eventually I got good enough to get into law school.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into law school, and this is now I'm living in Michigan. I'm going to Western Michigan Law School, Cooley Law School. And I was like, I do not want to mess this up, because law school is serious business. So what I decided to is I just, and I realized too, this the people you hang around with is going to really reflect who you are. So what I did was like, I'm not messing this up. So I grabbed the two smartest kids in school. It's really easy to find out who they are in law school because they're always raising their hand and things like that. So I just grabbed onto them and I just hung out with them all three
That was
years of law
smart.
school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in law school, I did the best I ever did at any school. I made the dean's list one semester. I even got the certificate of merit 1 year, and that's getting the highest grade in 1 year classes. And eventually I graduated law school. But to graduate law school, you have to take an internship. And I know I'm going through my story real fast. So if you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, no, I
So
I think no, that's great. If we can pause here for a second, because as as I'm listening, I'm thinking, well, I know your childhood story because I read your book, right? So I read
sure.
the part of your book. So, all of these altercations and things that were taking place in high school, you know, you're a smart individual, obviously. Not everybody can go to law school and become a lawyer, right? Or have the discipline and such to do that. So if you can just, I'm thinking like, well, listeners don't know from where you came. They don't know that, like you didn't grow up in a house that was like pro college. Well, you did because you went to private school and stuff, but you had a lot of adversity and you didn't have a lot of, you were kind of beaten down from the terror that you and your siblings lived in
Sure.
because you came from an abusive childhood. So I think that's the real, do you see a connection between, I mean, had that not been your story in the beginning, you may not have had that high school experience. It would have been completely different.
Oh, absolutely. And so, people say, I'm so grateful for these things that happened to me, adversity. And people say that, and it's hard to really believe that because it did make me who I am today. But it's really, it's easy to say it, but to actually feel
Mm.
that, like, obviously, I don't wish that my childhood was different. It would have been then my life would have been different. I don't know if I would have tried as hard. I don't know if I don't know where I'd be right now. But so I have
You
to,
just wanted to, yeah, you wanted to get out of your home and succeed.
right. Right. But also, I think a lot of me pushing, going to law school and doing all the things I want to do, I wanted to prove to them, prove to my mom, my stepfather, you know what, I'm not smart. I mean, I am smart. You know what I mean? I can do this. I'm
Mhm.
not a loser. My stepfather used to call me loser all the time. And so I was kind of, a lot of it was like just prove them wrong. You know what I mean? So it kind
Mhm.
of pushed me pretty hard. But also, and we could fast forward a little bit, I didn't realize that how bad my childhood was until I really sat down and started writing my book, to be honest with you.
Wow.
I started
Mhm.
like writing my book and I'm a big ultra runner. And so I was just running about like talking about my like running adventures and like growing up like through adversity. And it wasn't until I really started writing down and talking about my stepfather, I was like, oh my goodness. And I was talking about how we were raised, like this wasn't right, and that was
Yeah.
like one of the first times
Okay.
and I don't see myself as a victim, but that's one of the first times I came to terms with it, so to speak. That wasn't really that. Then I could really start healing once I realized
Right.
how bad it was and things like that.
Yeah, well, if you just look at the very first interaction that you had with your stepfather, like that was that was really he put the fear in you immediately. And so if anyone listening, I mean, if that was the beginning, that was the intro. You can see how your first couple rest of your years went in your elementary years and such. Um,
Right.
as far as abuse and stuff. Yeah. So it's pretty phenomenal. And I think it's really interesting that Mr. Bradley put that seed
Brady,
in you,
Mr.
which
Brady. Actually, fun
Brady, I'm
fact, his
sorry,
name is
Miss
Tom. His name is Tom
uh,
Brady, not the
Tom
quarterback.
Brady. Isn't that? But he put that seed in you, and then you became a lawyer, and you actually represented yourself in that high school thing, and were had enough, and know-how and intelligence to ask the right questions in court, which then led you on to a career in law, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it's also one of my favorite quotes is from Mark Twain. It's like, keep away from people who belittle your ambition. Small people always do that, but they're really great, make you feel that you too can become great. And so I
Mhm.
had friends who were always bringing me down. And like I said, Mr. Brady was one of the first people who was like, you can do something great. And the power that that has, especially as a boy who's growing up, is just unbelievable. It's huge. You know what I mean? It's just the trajectory from that moment. And I don't know what would have happened to me if I didn't have those little small things that happened to me. It seemed so insignificant kind of at the time, but it was just
Mhm.
such a big thing, as I moved on with my life.
Yeah.
So
Wow. Hmm.
yeah. And a lot of the emphasis I talk about in the book is, hanging around the right friends and the right mentors. And eventually when I was in New York City, I had another mentor that I had a job with. His name was David. I call him Gary in the book, but I started working with him, and he's the one who actually introduced me to like the right books to read and like believing in yourself and like optimism, positivity, and just kind of nourished what Mr. Brady started. But it was just amazing to see these people that can actually push you forward in life. Because, like I said, when I was a kid and a teenager, I thought all men were just mean, angry people. And just once you realize that that's not the case, it's not the world. It just opened up all kinds of doors for me, and just I just wanted to be and do better.
Wow. Yeah. I could see that. And that's a great piece of advice. And it's so true that who you surround yourself with, you are going to pretty much become like. And so that's so important.
Right. And so after I go into law school, there's one other thing that happened to me after I graduate law school. But to pass the bar exam, you have to take in New York City and become a licensed attorney. You have to take like a character and fitness evaluation. That means they have to do this huge background check on you. It's like almost like a FBI background check, become an attorney. And I was terrified of doing that because you have to disclose everything to them that you've done, even the things that you didn't get arrested for. Because if they find out that you didn't disclose to them and they find out like you did these things, you won't get admitted to the bar. And I
Right.
was so terrified all 3 years of high school. I would have panic attacks, like, because I didn't think I was going to be able to, be able to take the bar exam. I just thought I was just going to have a JD. I was like this, I was kind
Right.
of going through this for no reason, just kind of proving myself. But after I graduated, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try this, and in New York City, you have to interview a prosecutor before you even like admitted to the bar. And so what I had to do was I was living in New York. I flew back to Ohio and I went to all the police stations that I ever got arrested at. And I had quite the rap sheet. Nothing like crazy, but I mean, there was a felonious assault in there that got dropped down. There was a hit and skip, underage drinking, all kinds of things. And I had to gather all this information up. And I went to all of the police stations, got in trouble, and I submitted to the bar and just to see what would happen. And I had to show up for the interview one day. And I tell this story in my book. I had to wait for like forever because they actually brought a special prosecutor in to question me. And
Mhm.
when she showed up, she had this big, thick packet of like all the kinds of like labels on it. And that was my file. And I was like scared to death. So we sat down. She started leafing through it, like going over all the things that I'd done. And I'm just sitting there scared. She was like, "Oh, quite the file here." I was like, "Yeah." And then she finally pulls out this piece of paper. She starts looking at it and she starts asking me questions about it. It was a speeding ticket that I got when I was in law school, like late for a class one day. She goes, "I see you have a speeding ticket here." I guess because it was like the most recent thing on my record. She goes, "How do I know you're not going to do this, anymore?" And I said, "Well, I live in New York now. I don't have a car, so it's pretty impossible." And she goes, so she kind of chuckled. She goes, going through this. She goes, keeps going through my file. And then she goes, "Well, you're going to be a good attorney, and an ethical attorney?" I go, "Yeah, for sure." She goes, "Okay." And then she
Stamped
stamped
it.
me. And then, yep. And then all of a sudden I was a licensed attorney in New York. And it was
Wow,
just
that's incredible.
amazing. Yeah, it was a big relief.
Let's just pause there for a second because listeners who are, if there's anyone listening who is in actual sobriety, right? That is one of like the biggest fears that a lot of people have because they do come from checkered past. And, but we live in 2024, second chances are what it is. So I can't tell you how many people that I've known that have been in fear of applying for a job or getting a teaching position or anything that have a past that is unlikely that they would be able to pursue that career. And every time when you are walking right and you are doing what you're supposed to do, all of those people got those jobs, and none of that was to be held back. And those fears became unwarranted after the people who were presently looking at them saw their character, saw who they were, saw the direction their life was going in. It just didn't apply. So my encouragement for listeners is to apply for that job, to not have that fear, to go for it anyway. Don't hold back because on a chance or a dream that you have because you think you're not going to get it due to something that happened 20 years ago.
Right. And another thing I'll say on top of that, you're absolutely right. But also, what do you have to lose? Let's say it doesn't work out for you. You're still in the same position you were before. At least you tried. You know what
Good
I
point.
mean? And then
Mm-hmm.
also these people that, interview you, they've been through their own things. You just happen to put it
Exactly.
out there, so it's a little more understanding. Some people aren't understanding, but at least you have to try. And a big theme in the book that I talk about, your past does not predict your future or where you're going or who you are, or things like that. So if you believe in yourself just a little bit and give it a go, amazing things can happen.
Let's take a moment to hear a recovery story from one of my sponsors. At the age of 25, recently married and a new father, Jack found himself in a Texas rehab facility detoxing. After 10 years of addiction, he was finally able to admit that it was time to get help. Not only did SoberLink allow him to be accountable and track his sobriety, SoberLink allowed Jack to prove to himself and others that he could make the change he had always hoped for. SoberLink is the portable sobriety tracker taking the recovery world by storm. It has built-in facial recognition, sensors that detect cheating, and instant results sent to contacts. It's the number one accountability tool for keeping yourself honest and rebuilding trust. Visit www.soberlink.com/sober-living and check out the show notes to click the link and receive $50 off your device today. Now back to our guest. 100%. And two, in knowing your history of, a lot of that was just not your fault. It was not there was no you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't think your trajectory would have looked like that had you not come from the home that you did come from, or under, his hand or whatever, it just wouldn't have went that way. So
Sure.
you gave yourself a chance and you succeeded, you know, and despite of what you were handed, as far as the childhood that you had, which is maybe a common thread for some people listening as well, you know.
Right. So you're absolutely right. And so, and also it's also those people that, and I encourage everybody to, you know, if you don't have a mentor or you don't have somebody, I used to make a lot of excuses like, oh, I can't find a mentor, or, you know, nobody will mentor me, or I can't find like positive people. You can, in this day and age, you can on the internet, like you can just listen to the podcast. And a mentor doesn't have to be somebody you actually have a real relationship with. You could just listen to the podcast as somebody who inspires you, or read their books. They could be alive or dead. And if you just get those people's information and their message in your mind, that can be a mentor for you. And that's what I did for years. And that's what I still do today. And so I
Mhm.
encourage anybody, you know, just don't make excuses like, oh, I didn't have a mentor like, you know, you had Mr. Brady or like you had in David. I you can find your own mentors by reading the books, by listening to the podcast, by, you know, doing what you need to do. And so it's just not an excuse. So that's a mentor doesn't have to be a real live person or like, you know, somebody to push you forward. You don't need to know them, but you can create a relationship with them in your head by, you know, find it wherever you want.
Sure.
So I just wanted to
Yeah.
say that.
Yeah, and another good point is that it's you do, like you had just mentioned that you don't have to actually go somewhere. You know, everything's available online and everything is now free online. So
Right.
even if someone's at the bottom of their game and they don't have a lot of finances to work with, it's not that we have to pay $300 to go to this event to hear the speaker. We can actually find five speakers in 5 minutes from our home,
Right.
on your phone, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the resources are there. And yeah. So if you want to talk a little bit about your book, because you really poured a lot of descriptive, your writing is so concrete. So it's actually like you can actually visualize and see everything that you're talking about, which really is captivating for your story. And so you said it was healing. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, and like I said, when I first started writing this book, I didn't realize that how bad my childhood was until I started writing it down. I wanted to write about like my running adventures and coming over adversity. And then once I started writing down what happened to me as I was growing up, it was like I don't want to say epiphany or aha moment, but once you realize what's happened to you or what you've been through, that's a process when you can start healing and doing something about it. I was like, okay, I was, you know, raised in an abusive atmosphere and, you know, and it was not a good scene. Now I can do the proper steps to move forward from this, you know? And so what I started doing was I was like, okay, I started looking at things that weren't working for me. You know, one is the alcohol. So I had to change my relationship with alcohol. That was, you know, one of the biggest things. But even when you stop drinking, you have to like, in order to heal, well, for me, I had to encompass that with a lot of other things. So I started you know, journaling a lot. I started going to therapy, IFS therapy. If anybody's looking in therapy, I highly recommend it. Internal Family Systems Therapy. It's absolutely amazing. And then reading the right books, reading the right podcasts, and then finding the right friends, you know, the right, and which I emphasize a lot too, because once you find your tribe with people that are similar to you and pushing you to become better and like, and know your story and know who you are and still want to, you know, be friends with you and push you, that's really healing too. And it's nice to have those. And so, and then sharing my story. Once I shared my story and put it out there, I found out there's other people similar to me in similar situations, and that's really healing too. So that's kind of the trajectory on. And the reason why I wrote that book is to share my story because I understand there's other people that might be able to relate to this. And it
Mhm.
was, you know, selfishly, it was kind of healing to me to put all of this out there and put it down there. And so that's where we're at today.
Hmm. Yeah. So the book is excellent. It's like one of those reads that you can read so fast. You know, you just want to read more. It's like a complete page turn. The way that you wrote it is really good, and I would encourage listeners to look it up. It's called Wandering Spark. It's a memoir, Kyle Robinson, and we'll give that information later on. But there's something that I think that was really good in the introduction. And you talk about being at a bar, and I could relate to it a lot where you were there with friends and you said, like, I just don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do what they're doing. Like, they didn't, you know, they weren't really talking about what you were thinking about. You were kind of figuring out what you wanted to do in your life. And I remember you just left that day. Like you paid for your stuff and you walked out and started to make different decisions for yourself. And I know that's hard to like take yourself away from who you've been with,
Right.
to kind of go after something else. Cause it's like you know, well, who do we think we are or whatever? But it's like you really felt that call to like do something different and you followed it. And, I commend you for that because it's not an easy thing to do. And another thing that is difficult to do is to actually share the story. Um, you know, I know that for myself, when I first started speaking openly about my story, it was so difficult. Like I was like, I don't know if I should have done that,
Right.
because
I hear you.
that, yeah, it's just like, the first podcast that I was on that I publicly spoke about alcohol, I hadn't for 18 years. And literally for the next 3 days, I was just melting like, no, no, I shouldn't have done that, but I couldn't take it back. And what I
Right.
found was, I was so fearful that people were that I knew, just the people that I knew. I didn't really care about people that I didn't know. We're just going to like run in the other direction. And I got to tell you, they did not. They actually came toward me. And I'm wondering what kind of experience you had with sharing your story on the pages of a book and
It's
out loud here.
very similar to yours. So yeah, I was absolutely terrified, just putting it out there, like, and like you, I was like, what did I just do? You know what I mean? And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
and, and your true friends, the people that and your family who really care about you, they'll embrace it and they'll say, you know what, this is, I can understand like where you come from now, or this happened to me. And they started sharing their stories. And also it's just so healing because you don't really have to hide anything anymore. Not that I was hiding it, but I just never brought up what was going on with me. And then once you like put like this darkness and like shed light on it, it doesn't have so much power over you anymore. And so that's really what's a big thing for me. So now I'm not scared to talk about it. I'm not ashamed to talk about it. It just puts it out there because I know it's healing for me and it can be healing for other people. But yeah, it's so terrifying because we're so worried what other people think. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not like all my fear is not gone. I just feel that fear and I just do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And just
Sure.
knowing that it's just part of the process. And so I understand where people are at and they're just so scared and they're just saying, and here's another thing, I'm sure people are saying, well, my situation's different. You don't understand where I'm coming from. And I used to say that all the time because guess what? My mom is still with my stepfather right
Really?
now.
Is that true?
They're still
Wow.
together. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
And
wow.
so that used to mess with and so that's why I was like, oh, well, you don't understand. Like things are different. My mom was still pushing this stepfather. I mean, like 5 years ago until I finally had to tell her, this is enough. I'm not going to call him dad. You know what I mean? I just put a stop to him, just stop talking to him. And so everyone's situation is different. But once you start the healing process and put it out there and just face the fear, I think everything changes. And it's hard. It's very difficult. Like you said, it's not going to be easy at first because once you share your story, you're going to be like, oh, what did I do? What did I do? But as you keep doing it, as you keep moving forward,
Mhm.
it's so much better than just keeping it hidden stuff down. I think it just puts a better light on it. So that's
Yeah.
what I think about that.
Yeah. And I think that's very true. That's very true. Did your mom read your book?
No, my mom, so we could talk about my mom. So she's still with her, with my stepfather. And so she doesn't talk about it. She and I write about this a little bit. She just pretends that everything's okay. She's kind of the mom who like wants to put the story out there that, oh, we have a great family. This is the stepfather. He took over my children. Everything's fine. And so she'll just pretend
Mhm.
that everything's okay. She won't face anything. And I know she has her own issues too that she has to face, but she won't ever admit that like, anything was wrong. She's like rationalize, oh, it wasn't so bad. She's kind of like what she'll say is like, oh, she'll focus on like some of the nice things he did. It was like, see, it wasn't so bad. He did this for you. But I go, I told her one time, I go, I go, he could have like found the cure for cancer or gave me $1 million. That doesn't, justify what he did or what he was doing the whole time. And it's kind of a bummer, but everyone has their own journey. I can't control like what she does or how she changes. I just control my healing process, and that's all I need to focus on and go from there. And
Sure.
so, and I know saying, well, and my point was like everyone's story is different, sure, but it's no excuse not to do something about it, not to heal inside. There's always hope for everybody. And I just want to go back to the one thing too, we just sitting in that bar that one day. It was just I felt that way a lot of times sitting with my friends. It's just one times I just had enough of it. You know what I mean? Like, and I know a lot of listeners are sitting there. We all kind of lie to ourselves, like, oh, this is fun. This is great. Like, this is a good time. But first, I don't feel so good the next morning. I'll tell you that much. It's definitely not worth it. It wasn't worth it for me just to, division, and also it just ruined everything else for me, ruined my motivation, ruined my physical health, ruined my mental health. It was absolutely brutal. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted more for my life. And I just had enough. I just came to a point. It wasn't like I hit like rock bottom because I was doing, good in my career. I was doing good with, everything else. It was just like I just didn't feel good and I wanted more out of my life. And I just finally got to the point where I was sick of, if I don't change right now, this way my life's going to be for the rest of my life. And I didn't want that. So I just had to stop.
Mm.
So that's what.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. And everybody has yeah. So listeners who are looking to make a change, like completely possible from
Right.
wherever you come from and from whatever you're presently doing, you just have to make that. I think it's big on the internal decision. Once that internal decision is made to do something different, you will do it, at least that's been my experience. Yeah. So, also I'm wondering like how, so after law school, you had mentioned that you did some entrepreneurial work, and is that the work that you've done as an author, or do you have something different that you do
Right.
as
So
far
right
as?
after law school, and I got, I passed the bar, I got this job in New York City at a legal education company. And it was just because my internship in law school was at a matrimonial law firm, and I hated every second of it. I was like, I did not want to, and it's,
Uh,
divorce and things like that. And I was like, these guys who I was working for were completely miserable. I was like, sure, they're, raking in the money, but they hate their lives. They're completely miserable. So once I passed the bar, I just mainly looked for jobs where you needed to be an attorney, a licensed attorney, but not practicing. So I got this job at a legal education company. And that's when I met my mentor, my friend David, and I call him Gary in the book. I said, well, I changed everybody's names just to make for comfortable, and I'm sure he won't care that I'm saying his name. But so what happened there is, he's somebody who believed in me, but I thought to myself, he was kind of similar age to me. I was like, wait a minute, this guy is no smarter than me. And he's a real smart guy. I was like, but if he can do it, how come I can't do it? And I learned like a long time ago, like success leaves clues. If you follow somebody else's success or do the same thing they're doing, you'll be successful yourself. So after living in New York City for like 5 years, I moved back to Ohio and I just started my business similar to what he does on my own. And it kind of just not blew up, but it started working. I was like, oh, this works. You know what I mean? So I kind of went all
mhm.
in on that, kind of did that. And it gave me the free time to really focus on writing my book and putting my message out there and things like that. So that's kind of how I got really lucky. And well, first of all, I shouldn't say really lucky because my friends say, "Oh, you got it lucky." I was like, "Yeah, all you need to do is just go to law school yourself and become an attorney." You know what I mean? And then you can do it too. It's not that easy. It seems now, but I worked my butt off to get to, where I am today to get there.
Sure.
Now it just reaping the rewards a little bit. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that answers your questions on what I do
Yeah,
now.
no, that's great. You also talked about ultra marathons. What are those, and do you still do them?
Yes, I do. An ultra marathon is any distance over a marathon, any distance over 26.2 miles. And so I do a lot of ultra marathon, 50K races, things like that, 50-mile
Mhm.
races. I've done a
Oh, wow.
100-mile race before. And so I actually talk about this a little bit in the book. After I moved back to Ohio after New York City, I actually bought a conversion van and moved out west for like 6 months and followed like these trail runners all around and kind of like, try to do that scene. And because I thought I wanted like to be in that. And it was fun for a while, but again, these guys were not right fit for me because they were drinking a lot and partying a lot. And I wasn't able to, forge real good friendships with them. And then I thought to myself, you know what? When I moved back to Ohio, I had a good group of friends that were runners too. Why did I leave here to go find these guys when everything I was looking for was back home? And so I just moved back home and kind of just
Mhm.
had this great group of friends that we do trail running with. And I still run with them. I ran with them this morning.
Oh,
We
wow.
get up like at 4:30 a.m. We run at 5:30 and we go out there and go after it. And these are my good buddies. And I'm a big advocate of exercise of running because it's like my meditation to get out there and put the miles in and things like that. So I'm a big runner, big ultra runner, and that's how I found my tribe, so to speak, is through running. And I just can't, I'm very thankful for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you let listeners know where they can connect with you throughout the week and
Sure.
also your
So
website so they can purchase this book?
yeah, sure. So I'm on all social medias. It's Kyle V as in Victor Robinson.com. That's my website. And then I'm on all social media handles is Kyle V Robinson. So it's
V.
pretty easy to
Robinson.
find me. Yep.
Okay. And your book's available where?
It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever you can find it. Wandering Spark. So you can look through my website or you go straight to Amazon, wherever you want.
Any last words for anybody listening that needs encouragement or hope to get over, a past and get into their future?
Sure. So, like I said before, a couple of things. Your past does not dictate your future. So, if you think that, and also the biggest thing is just believing in yourself. If you have a little something in yourself that you want more in your life, that's the voice that you should be listening to and just go all in on that. If you believe in yourself, it doesn't matter what other people think or what other people say. You believe in yourself, you start doing it. And once you get momentum, you're going to be unstoppable.
Thank you for tuning into the Sober Living Stories podcast. If you have been inspired, consider subscribing and sharing with anyone who could use hope in their lives. Remember to stay tuned for more inspiring stories in the episodes to come. To view our featured author of the month or to become a guest yourself, visit www.jessicastepanovic.com.